Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 25th of July, and sure enough, made new highs. Faded off of them, fairly decent coming back, but still progressing. Positive shakeout. You now have the rising orange, which usually also exacerbates a little bit of weakness. It's that first dip down here on the orange that will actually be the next propelling up market move wise. We got a little overdone here on the extreme with the yellow signal right there, which meant that some buyers were having a little trouble sustaining that. Not a horrible shock, and it was interesting during the intraday action. We really filled in all of the positive extremes that we had from the other day in that as well. So that was quite effective. You can see the NASDAQ turning around with that positive shakeout to start the day, though it's not finished yet. The NASDAQ certainly showed a little bit more weakness from a shakeout standpoint than we've seen from the S&P, which was just more or less in equilibrium. And Euro just holding flat right within that zone. And as long as it stays in that elevated area, it's going to be just fine. A little bit of recovery on the Treasury, but still with the dip below the red line, not expecting a whole lot from that either. And oil just below the ABM green line. It just becomes the pivot point back and forth. But you can see that spider out here of the cyan rising, green falling. There should be a little more weakness. And if there is any easing in oil, that will help things. At least growth-wise, you still have this clamorings of how the economy is falling apart and it's end of days, and yet we're showing record growth. So it's an interesting separation between what you read in news versus what's actually happening. Very strange, but I guess we've been seeing that from the news cycles for well over a year now. And gold, like we said, wasn't going to do much off of that, given the fact what we saw here from the extremes, no dip of the orange below. So it's got to be holding on a little bit longer. And, well, we got to shrink this from a 5K chart because it's quite an interesting day. A little bit more. So we ended up with our peak coming through. We began the day with quite a few positive extremes, but with a reset of the shakeout, and then we ended up propelling to well, significant highs, but we created a lot of positive extremes, as you can see through here. This previous level had been established from some time back, but positive extremes, all the way from, well, the furthest, which didn't get pulled back to, was this beginning one. And we don't usually worry about that one. It's usually the secondary level that's right up here, and that corresponded where we dipped with the white line. So got all the way up there, we started making, and this is what I was talking about, higher highs on lower shakeout readings. And of course then a nice DOC spread right at the peak. And that just gave us a retrace, just shy of the 50% there, but then eventually the 50% rose a little bit to capture it. And an interesting one, we ended up with gold above the 50, but literally right after it came in, shakeout started to break down right here. And that in fact then led to move to the lows, which no improvement and no dip below with the orange, so the expectation would be that you would make new lows, and that's exactly what happened. And that led to white candle, which created even lower lows, which just filled in literally that entire stretch, even slightly below it. Right there was the positive extreme, this second one right here, and we dipped slightly below. It got midway into the body of the first candle right, if I get down to the zero line right there, it was just a fraction more to go. Not saying that we aren't going to hit that at some point today, but we ended up with gold below the 23%, and we would expect that to come back and fill it. We're even expect that maybe even to have dipped down to the lows. It got pretty close, all the way down to right about here, just shy of it, but well within that 80% range. Usually I like to take a point between the 23 and the 0 as a marker for that, but it certainly filled back in the white candle as expected. And right here in pre-market, just getting back up over the 50% with the dip of the orange going in right there. So a lot of back and forth action, which makes it a little bit choppy, but if you have these defined targets and ranges, it certainly makes it much more helpful seeing that. But this complete reset here intraday of the shakeout that is very healthy, particularly if you're looking for a new run one way or another. Really the big issue that you always look for in this case is, am I seeing additional breakdown readings with some serious distribution of shakeout, and we ended up with a decent dip, just not enough to really carry it beyond what we expected, and we still have those daily ABM values that really become pivotal, and we're a long way from it. It's back down to 27.95. So all in all, decent action. All those who sold in May and went away are not too happy with the new highs being produced. So that's sort of typical when you get behind the curve, but it also forces additional buying because people have to maintain the same return for those that stay in it, and that becomes a self-feeding sort of mechanism that exists within the market. So always bear that one in mind. You're not playing against fundamentals as much as you're playing against what others have to do return-wise, because they're the ones that are going to move the market to match things. As always, though, I will keep posting charts as they're relevant. Trade well.